Hello, you are watching Shalom World News. I'm Marina Grosser from Washington, D.C. Here are the latest headlines from around the world. The United States expressed optimism on Wednesday regarding ongoing talks aimed at securing a ceasefire and the release of hostages in Gaza, despite the dire humanitarian situation prompting South Africa to seek emergency measures from the International Court of Justice in Hague. Negotiations involving Hamas, Qatar, and Egypt, albeit without Israeli participation, continue in hopes of achieving a 40-day ceasefire ahead of Ramadan. While speculation suggested an impasse in negotiations, the U.S. State Department emphasized that a truce agreement remains feasible. However, South Africa, which previously accused Israel of genocide in Gaza at the World Court, urged immediate action due to the looming threat of famine among Palestinian civilians. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation in Gaza continued to deteriorate, with mounting casualties and urgent calls for increased aid from the U.S. and Britain. On Holy Thursday this year, Pope Francis will preside over the Lord's Supper Mass in Rebibbia Women's Prison. The private visit to Rome's Women's Penitentiary will include interactions with female convicts and staff. The Mass will mark the beginning of the Easter Triduum, which represents Christ's passion, death, and resurrection. The Pope had celebrated a Maundy Thursday Mass in the same prison in 2015. Meanwhile, during the Wednesday general audience, the Pope reiterated his invitation to pray for the people afflicted by the wars in Ukraine and the Holy Land, underscoring the need for peace. Reminding the need for a spiritual renewal during the Lenten season, the Pope urged the faithful to return to God with all their hearts, emancipating themselves from everything that masks their lives. In Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince, armed bandits abducted 3 nuns from a Catholic orphanage. The bandits entered La Madeleine orphanage, where the sisters belonging to the St. Joseph de Cluny congregation reside. As insecurity is rising at an alarming pace in the country's capital, Catholic clergy are reported to remain there to serve the people. Father Thomas Hagen, during a live stream mass on March 3rd, said Haiti is in a really bad state now. He also said the roads are blocked and there have been attempts to seize the airport. A 72-hour emergency has been declared in the country following a prison outbreak of more than 5,000 inmates. The country is facing gang violence as well as assaults on police installations and correctional facilities. After a recent surge in assaults on Catholic churches in the United States, Senator Marco Rubio has urged President Joe Biden to expedite investigation and prosecute the assailants. Citing an increase in such incidents, he emphasized the dire need of addressing these religiously motivated attacks, while highlighting that only 25% of over 400 cases have resulted in arrests. The frequency of attacks on Catholic churches has escalated, especially following the leaked Supreme Court decision in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. Enumerating egregious acts such as vandalizing a statue of the Virgin Mary, decapitating a statue of baby Jesus, and a priest being assaulted with a machete, Senator Rubio condemned the administration for inadequate action and selective enforcement of legal protections. 16 Republican attorneys general have issued a warning to YouTube and its parent company, Google, regarding their placement of quote-unquote misleading labels on pro-life videos. Iowa Attorney General Brenna Bird spearheaded the initiative, sending a letter to Google executive Neil Mohan on Monday, highlighting concerns about the labeling of pro-life content on the platform. The letter asserted that these notices violate the First Amendment and propagate false information about abortion, particularly regarding the risks associated with chemical abortion drugs. The attorneys general argued that such misinformation could potentially endanger women's lives. The attorneys general emphasized that chemical abortions often take place in a woman's home without medical supervision, leading to roughly 1 in 25 women requiring emergency room treatment after taking abortion pills. Asserting their consumer protection authority, the attorneys general threatened legal action against Google and YouTube for spreading falsehoods. Despite opposition from national pro-life organizations and warnings about the moral ramifications from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, the House and Senate of Alabama enacted a law giving immunity to in vitro fertilization clinics, also known as IVF clinics. After the Alabama Supreme Court decision that defined unborn IVF babies as persons, the new bill gives immunity from prosecution to IVF clinics in case they happen to damage or cause the death of an embryo during IVF procedures. The Catholic Church advocates for the use of existing moral alternatives to in vitro fertilization and condemns in vitro fertilization. At least 18 were reported killed, leaving more than a dozen injured in eastern Syria following an Islamic State or ISIS militant attack on villagers collecting desert truffles, which are edible fungi that resemble potatoes. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, or SOHR, among the dead include 4 members of the National Defense Forces. The ambush happened on Wednesday, was one of the deadliest ISIS attacks in the area in over a year. The Britain-based War Monitor, SOHR, said more than 50 were missing in the attack, carried out by gunmen believed to be in ISIS cells in the Kabajeb Desert. The world's best quality truffles are produced in the Syrian desert, which yield high prices. In late February this year, an ISIS landmine killed 14 truffle hunters, including women. The International Organization for Migration has reported that 8,565 migrants lost their lives on land and sea routes globally last year, marking a record high ever since it began tracking fatalities. The death toll in 2023 represented about 20% increase compared to that of the previous year. The most notable surge in deaths occurred on the perilous Mediterranean Sea route. The majority of fatalities, approximately 3,700, resulted from drowning, which also include the migrants who went missing with their bodies unrecovered. Asia and Africa experienced the most significant rise in fatalities in recent times. The organization highlighted challenges in gathering data in remote regions such as the Darien Gap, a hazardous route through which migrants travel from South America to North America. Over 200 people, predominantly women, were reportedly abducted from a refugee camp in Gamboru Nogala region of northeastern Nigeria on Monday by jihadists suspected to be affiliated with Boko Haram. The incident is one of the biggest kidnappings since the notorious abduction of over 270 schoolgirls in 2014 and highlights the continuous risks posed by terrorist groups in the area. The UN expressed deep concern over the incident and demanded unconditional release of the abductees. Mohammed Malik Fall, UN's humanitarian coordinator, said on Wednesday that the incident was a stark reminder that women and girls are among those most affected by Islamic insurgency in northeast Nigeria. Boko Haram's insurgency began in 2009, resulting in the deaths of over 40,000 and displacement of 2 million people. A UN agency has warned that a year-long conflict between rival generals in Sudan has put the country in the risk of the world's worst hunger crisis that would affect over 25 million people. 9 out of 10 individuals in the nation are facing severe hunger and are unable to access aid due to ongoing violence. Cindy McCain, the head of the World Food Program, described how the conflict involving the military and a paramilitary group has devastated millions in Sudan, with 18 million people experiencing acute hunger. Many lives have been lost and 8 million have been displaced. The UN has condemned the increase in gender-based violence as a crime against humanity, highlighting the heightened risk faced by 4.2 million women and girls. A Christian youth ministry in the state of Oregon was reportedly denied access to state grant funding because it asks employees and volunteers to sign a statement of faith. Alliance Defending Freedom attorneys filed a federal lawsuit on Monday against Oregon state officials on behalf of 71.5 Ministries, appealing the court to protect its freedom to work with like-minded individuals who uphold its religious convictions and mission to promote the gospel of Jesus Christ with several youth mentoring programs. The ministry is involved in serving youngsters from all faiths and backgrounds, including those at detention centers, correctional facilities, and expectant and parenting teens. It had been receiving funds from Oregon's biennial Youth Community Investment Grants Program, but the approval for 2023 to 2025 was reversed, citing a new rule requiring the applicants not to discriminate based on their religion in their work. U.S. pharmacy giants CVS and Walgreens have created controversy by confirming the sale of chemical abortion drugs in a few states, prompting outrage from pro-life organizations. The tablets, which are part of a 2-drug regimen, will be accessible over the counter in select regions. Pro-life supporters denounce this action because it compromises women's health and undermines medical standards. SBA Pro-Life America's State Policy Director, Katie Daniel, called the decision to sell chemical abortion drugs shameful, as it can cause incalculable harm to unborn babies and their mothers. The pharmacy's decision comes amid a larger controversy over the FDA's limits on chemical abortion drugs, with the Supreme Court scheduled to hear related cases. Meanwhile, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris commended the pharmacy effort as a step towards ensuring so-called healthcare access. The Crown Prosecution Service dropped the case against two Christian preachers in the UK. The two men, John Dunn and Sean O'Sullivan, were charged under Section 35 of the Antisocial Behavior, Crime and Policing Act of 2014. The accused, who are supported by the Christian Legal Center, were arrested last June following their refusal to stop preaching on Glastonbury High Street. The police had taken the men into custody, accusing them of causing harassment, alarm, and distress. The preachers, who are born-again Christians, were handing out leaflets and preaching against same-sex practices and transgenderism in the streets. The preachers were set free since the Crown Prosecution Service failed to provide evidence against them. The judge also granted the accused their legal fees as well as their travel costs. And those are your latest headlines. Join us again tomorrow for more. You can also visit us at swnews.org for more updates. Shalom.